Bobby, you all ready? Morgan? All right, everybody ready to start? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'll call this meeting to order today for our Thursday, September 28, 2023, Northumberland County and Northumberland County School Work Group. Welcome everybody here today that's in the courtroom, anybody that could be in the virtual world tonight. Pleased to have you. All right, our second item on the agenda is introductions. And start over on the left and work our way around is fine.
Okay.
I'm Karen Pica, PhD type. If we're going to be using formalities, then it'll be doctor, but my preference is just to go by Karen. And I'm really grateful that I'm able to be here with you all tonight. I think one of the things that has piqued my interest from talking to a lot of people in the county and looking at the numbers is that within less than 5 years, at the current rate of increase in the budget for the schools, the county will actually have no money for law enforcement or anything else. And so one of the things that I want to do is hopefully offer a little bit of expertise and learn a whole lot. I'd love to learn from you guys a whole lot about what happens with the budget, and then also make sure that I'm listening to the people in the county and what their questions and concerns are. So thank you everyone for coming tonight. I have a dog, I have a husband, and that's it. There's a lot more, but it's not interesting, so thank you.
And you're serving as our community member?
I am, yes,
yeah, okay.
That's why I was talking about listening to the community members. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Oh.
You can move
Might
it.
have to bring that closer to
Yeah,
you.
you can move it.
Oh, I thought it was buckled into the table. Okay, well, there you go. All right, here, so the short version of it is I'm perfect. There we go. Okay.
I'm Denise Mazik, District 3 School Board member. Been on the board now a couple of years. Still have a couple more left in this tenure. Excited to be able to give back and be of service to our children and our community. Anything else you all want to know?
You're perfect too.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. If you say so.
Yes, I do.
All right.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Dr. Linwood Blizzard II. I serve as a senior pastor of the Macedonia Baptist Church here in Heathsfield, Virginia. I'm a resident also of Heathsfield, Virginia. I'm serving as the community representative on behalf of the school board side, and just excited to be here. Looking forward to finding ways where the two boards can find synergy in advancing the needs of the community and the children here in Northumberland County.
And my name is Dana Obier. I serve as District 1 representative on the school board. I was born and raised in Northumberland County. I used to have daycare in my home for almost 18 years. And then I started substitute teaching with the schools and got interested with that. And when the opening became available, I ran for the school board. I've served for 8 years, and I will be up for election again, and I'm going unopposed. So I'm going to take that as a good sign that I must be doing something right. So I'm glad to be here tonight. I'm glad that Mr. Brand suggested this committee, and that we are here together working for the common goal, and that's the future of our students and kids of our county.
All right, thank you. All right, my name is Richard Haney. I'm a supervisor in District 2, also the chairman of Northumberland County Board of Supervisors. Been supervisor for probably 20 years now. So look forward to getting some information out of these meetings here.
I'm Jimmy Brand, District 1 Board Representative. I guess I'm the new kid on the block, just finishing up serving my first term. Born and raised here in the county, and I'm glad and excited for this group to come together because I hope we can come to some common ground on where we can make things happen and still be able to have funds available through the county to take care of the needs and means.
All right. I'm Luttrell Tadlock. I'm the county administrator. I've been county administrator for about 8 years. Been with the county for almost 23 years. As far as the capacity of serving on this board, Dr. Wargo and myself are more advisory role instead of participating, I guess, as a voting member or discussions per se. But glad to work with you all and certainly try to answer any questions you all have.
Good evening. I'm Holly Wargo, Division Superintendent. I have served as the Northumberland Superintendent since November of 2016. It's been an absolute honor, and I'm honored to be here this evening. Thank you to Mr. Brand for suggesting these meetings, and we look forward to working with you.
All right, thanks for all the introductions here. Next item on the agenda is the organization of the work group. First item is to have a chair. Anyone want to chair this meeting?
I just have discussion on that. If we could amend the agenda in a way, I don't know that coming together and working equally on the common goal would require having a chair and vice chair if it's an actual committee. I don't know what, do you have input on that, Jimmy? This is all your suggestions, so I wanted to see what your vision.
Common ground, I would like to see someone from the school side, the county side, head these meetings up.
I have a recommendation.
I would like to, it was my recommendation, I was gonna see if the speaker, Mr. Blizzard, could head this group up. That way they could receive questions and concerns from citizens and what have you, bring it back before this group and we can have discussions and hopefully make some progress. That was my thought on it. Or we can just sit around and have a discussion, but somehow or another, somebody's gotta come and head this up. And it doesn't need to be the county administrator or Ms. Wargo, because they got enough
No.
on their plate as it is.
So there's a way to meet both your objectives, I think. So if Linwood and I, as the citizen reps, right, this came about as part of the
Yeah, that's-
conversation on the Citizen Advisory Board. If he was amenable, instead of a chair and a vice chair, can we just have co-working group leads,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's a working group. It doesn't look like it has to have a charter and all that complicated
No.
stuff. But if you're amenable, then we could be the co-leads. We could have some interaction in between the meetings, come back to you guys with thoughts from the citizens, gather input, et cetera. So that would meet your objective, Dana, for not having
Yeah, because
vice chair and chair,
that was the
and
whole
Jimmy, that would
reason
meet your
for having
objective.
a
Yeah.
community member on
Right.
here, so that we know what the community wants, needs, wants to see us do as two boards working together moving forward.
The question I have is, what is the scope of this group? Because I'm not clear what our objectives here are to do. Are we actually creating the actual budget necessary to go before the Board of Supervisors and the school board? Or are we giving recommendations to both bodies as to how to proceed in thinking about their budgeting process?
So I think you and I should have coffee, because what you had said, I loved your terminology. You said, can you all hear me? I'm sorry, okay. You said, let's find synergy. Everyone has the same objective, which is, we want to make sure that we have preparation for the youth of this county. And you said, we need to find synergy. Unless y'all have decided what the objectives of the group are, I don't think this should be a group on putting together the budget, because I don't think that there's the expertise, right? That belongs somewhere else. But I think clearly part of what I've heard from the citizens is questions around understanding what's in it. So if you and I could get together, if y'all are amenable, we could come up with a scope which would help meet the concerns we've heard from the past. The school board's had concerns, you've had hearings, the Board of Supervisors had concerns. How about we get together and talk about what it is? And I would say preparing the budget is off the table as far as I'm concerned. That is not in our wheelhouse of expertise.
Well, this group is not, we're not gonna be decision makers. We need to
No.
have discussions and get some answers to some questions and work through some issues. We cannot be decision makers, especially when it comes to the budget, because the county administrator, they head the budget up, always has, always will. But I think we're a good group, this group is formed to try to work through issues and have answers to questions, and we can move forward from there. I think we haven't made any progress in the past
Right.
in trying to get things taken care of. I think this group, that's the main job for this group, is to try to work through. And some of the things may be a little tough, and we're all gonna have to go through it together to get answers and try to do the best we can with come back with solutions and all. But by no way are we gonna be decision makers on any of this. We can't make decisions for the school board, and we can't make decisions for the county. But we can have a lot of good discussions, and a lot of good things can come out of this.
So how does this shape the budgeting process? Like, this has to do something to shape the process, right? The end of this can't just be great conversation. It has to be something that shapes something. So the question is this a space where the Board of Supervisors gets clarification from the school board months in advance as to what will be presented to them in the March timeframe? Or is this something else? I'm trying to just figure out what do we gain? Because I mean, the question is, a lot of questions that come on the budget is questions out of the Board of Supervisors back to the school board, which requires repetitive revisions to the budget. Now, there are questions the citizens have also in terms of clarity and transparency of the budget. That's a different conversation, or maybe the same conversation. We're trying to figure out what is our objective out of this. So if we say, like, what are our, high point objectives? At the end of this time period of gatherings, this group will have done what?
Purpose. What's the purpose?
What is the scope of this group?
I think the main goal is to address the concerns and the questions that the citizens have been bringing before the board.
Okay,
Let's
okay.
straight to the point, let's bring them out, we'll
Yeah,
have
that's-
discussions on them and see what solutions, what's right's right, what's wrong's wrong, make suggestions. We can take them, like the school board can take it back to the school board, representatives take it back to the school board, board members take it back to the board. From there, we can hopefully make some progress. Hopefully, we'll get a better understanding on y'all's budget process. Hopefully, y'all get a better understanding what we have to look at when we make decisions on school budgets and all, as far as a whole county budget. So I think hopefully that will soften some of the conversations we have when the school board comes before the board at the meetings. We have a better understanding.
I would like to see this committee work together on breaking down the budget items before we present in March, and work together on cutting down that timeline of us waiting until June to get an approved budget. That would be one of my main concerns. We went through an awful time this summer with getting those contracts out late. So I would hope that one of the goals of this committee would be to actually cut down that timeline so that y'all, ahead of time of us presenting, what, whether we're going to do level funding or that type of thing.
If this group does its
And I
job
think-
right, we'll get to that.
Right,
Yeah.
and I think you're correct. I think we can work
Yeah.
toward that common goal.
Yeah, so we're talking now versus just coming and talking in March.
Right, so tonight, it's like, I was thinking, and I think everybody's on the same page. Tonight is just a meet and greet. And, we'll
up
leave here
dates.
tonight with probably some questions to come back next month to have answers or solutions to, and we'll start it rolling from there. And by the time we get around probably to the budget process, we
Yeah.
will be where we need to be with what you're talking about.
Okay. How often were you thinking about meeting?
I would like to meet once a month until we get established.
Okay,
And then we can have a talk, when it comes to the point, if we could meet every other month, that's fine.
okay.
So I think we'll have to have conversations more frequently, because I think
Right.
if we're going to really run this as a working group, and we're going to be able to get to the outcome, like you said, where we've got a transparent budget that comes to the Board of Supervisors and can move through the process quickly, I think there's going to be some work that has to be done before each meeting. And I would, pardon the term, assign homework. Probably what we're going to end up having is we're going to have some questions. So if Linwood and I get together and we come up with maybe some objectives, some questions, some answers, maybe we have to meet with Luttrell, maybe we have to meet with Tara to maybe get some of that groundwork. We come back to this group, we share what we've learned, And then we have some key questions that maybe need to be answered to move forward to the next set, right, the next month. So I think we probably will have to meet every couple of weeks and then listen to the citizens. This group will have to meet at least once a month to get to that March goal of the budget.
I hear you for sure. I agree with that.
That usually means you don't agree.
No, there's some parts of it I'm like, I don't know. Part of this is what Mr. Brandon's brought forward, is that there's been statements made to the county already about how people feel about the budgeting process. So I want to know what documentation do we have currently, because the Board of Supervisors, I mean, the meeting is public record. Do we have this recorded documentation what people have already said to us already first?
I have those.
You have those
I
already?
do, absolutely. They're part of the meeting that was in June.
Correct.
I actually went through the school board. The school board had a hearing in January. I've gone through all those notes. I've collected all the comments that were made in those public hearings. I've collected all the comments not only from this year's public hearings, but also going back to 2017. So yes, I have a full comprehensive list of all the questions that have been asked over the last 5 years with respect to the school board budget. Yes, sir.
Okay. As qualitative data, which means a question, I always got a question about the whole analysis of the qualitative data on top of that. But the other side of it is there is a relationship broken between the two boards. Like that, our conversation is not going to fix that, right? Because they have to get themselves together also. Okay. To what I believe as a former educator, even sitting here many times talking about this over the past 2 years, is restoring the trust of the two boards, to be able to have a space where the boards are given the authority and the trust to do their work as independent elected official boards. The Board of Supervisors does not, the school board does not report to the Board of Supervisors. They're equal bodies in terms of governance.
Well, not according to the law of Virginia. Sorry.
Just in the budgeting process, but in terms of elected officials. They're independently elected.
That's fair. They're elected officials.
Now,
But
the
according to
budget-
the Code of Virginia, the budget has to go
The
through.
budget goes before them, but whatever their actions work as a board, they're independent boards. So how do we begin to think of this as they're synergized, working together rather than working in distinct places? I agree, we can have the conversation, look through the data, see what they're saying, this, that, and the other, but I think part of this is figuring out what needs to happen to get the conversation moving, to approve. The aim of this is to get the budget approved like it was approved in 2019, I believe it was, 2020. 2020? 2020. The budget was approved in the year 2020, and early enough for contracts to be given out in the April or May timeframe. Starting in 2021, 2022, and 2023, the budget's been approved, with teacher contracts now come out at the end of June. For those who are not familiar with education, every other county and jurisdiction across the entire Commonwealth gives out contracts with teachers in April and May. So teachers know what they're supposed to, they know what they're gonna get and have what happen. With challenges that have happened here in fall 2020, which everybody knows what's happened in fall 2020, here, the Board of Supervisors changed the governance of the budget to then move it to, which pushed the budget and has to be forced to be approved once the new fiscal year's budget is being approved, which is done in around the June timeframe. The contract's now given out in June to the teachers, and the challenge becomes teachers are, watch many faces, don't know if they have a contract, and we recognize the challenge because we said we have the growing inflation, healthcare costs, these other things that are happening that cause the question to come, what happens next, and then and whatever happens with communication and how people think of taxes, whatever happens, the budget gets approved, can't run long enough basically, and it gets approved, but you get the contracts in late June, which is a problem for our teaching staff. We have the best, one of the top schools in the entire region right here. We need to retain our teachers and do our teachers well. But we also need to make sure we're doing the budgeting process justice also, both in time as well as cost to the citizens. So, I mean, we have to find a synergy for that, I think, here as both boards. And I think it's just looking at how does that workflow happen. And it could be that, I think part of the scope, I think the board, you and I can talk about scope all day. We can figure out scope that works perfectly fine. No, we can work it happen. But they should be part of that conversation also. We can give maybe a draft concept of it, but think about what the scope looks like. Conversations, how does conversations flow? What needs to happen? Because part of the transparency is, and then as pointed out, is it just talking through the budget and figuring out what's in the budget and how we prioritize the budget? Yeah. If that's the question, then that's a conversation. I don't want us to spin our wheels to go through data analysis to stuck in process of analysis, ultimately. I want to get us to the point of action, the movement, to actually find space for us to get this thing moving, because we're meeting monthly. Our time frame is, we're behind the 8 ball.
Well, so that brings up a good point.
We're behind the 8 ball right now.
If you want to, so let's say for hypothetical purposes, that the objective is to issue contracts by April 30th? Is that a good date? May 1st. Let's pick May 1st.
I'll say, we usually do like May 1st.
Okay, let's do May 1st. So to your point, right, if you want to issue contracts by May 1st, then I would say that you'd have to have the vote by April 15th, right, the April meeting. Is that fair? The school board, the Board of Supervisors, right, so that's
correct.
April 15th. I would argue I have a little bit of budget experience, but not in this county. So I would argue that you'd have to get, the school board would have to approve the budget and get it to the Board of Supervisors by February 10th. Because you have to allow for time to have the public hearing, right? You have to have a certain amount of time for that. So if one of the objectives is to make sure that we have line item clarity, we have the transparency, the citizens' questions are answered, you're absolutely right. Once a month isn't going to get us to a February 10th deadline.
For this board, we have October, November, December, and then you're right into that,
You got Christmas, yeah.
Thanksgiving and Christmas time, and people kind of go away at that time. But January, really, it's October, November, January for
Yeah.
meetings for us to do this and try to think about where are we broken as a county? That's really the question. Because we did this fine in 2020, pre-COVID, things happened. And if you look at the past minutes, you'll see the past minutes as when budgets were presented in the timeframe of, you've seen the minutes, so you know when they fall. So how do we get back to a space where we're able to approve budgets like that? And what's changed this relationship from happening how it was before in 2019 backwards?
So is February 10th, is that a fair deadline
You
to have
would-
the
yeah, and
budget?
you would
Because
have to back up the
hearings, you'd have to
dates.
have hearings, you would have to have public notice. I recognize that the school board cycle is usually a bit longer because you have to have public hearings as well. But even if it's a preliminary budget, the statute and the Code of Virginia doesn't, it requires a voted upon budget by certain timeframes. It does not prohibit or preclude a preliminary budget from being opened for conversations. So is
See,
that a
our
deadline?
school year is going to end earlier this year. We're ending the end of May.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's something to take into consideration. So really, you'd have to have an earlier budget calendar. There's no way around it.
So again, I think this is a lot of work for maybe the school board, because if we're saying February 10th, and you all normally put the budget in March 24th, that's shaving off 2 months. And if you say it needs to be even earlier than that, and you're looking at
Yeah,
January 30th,
It's been anywhere from the 1st of March to the 3rd week of March. It's not set on March.
but we'd have to get this in by the January 30th if we wanted to make sure, even a preliminary, right?
Yeah, and that's no problem at this point, but then we have to know that, like you said, working with trust, that when we do present it, it's kind of felt like a ping pong ball the last couple of years, go back and forth, and Holly comes back and forth, and, then we get into June, then this year was the end of June into July, so, as long as we're working together on that timeline, not just the school board's timeline, it has to be y'all too.
Years ago, I remember, and this is before me being on the board, I remember hearing a couple board members talk that one of the processes that they had was, before the school budget was presented, I believe it was with Mr. Staples, that he would get with, I don't know if it was Mr. Burton or Kenny, was the county administrator at the time, and one of the board members, and he would say, okay, this is what we're looking at this year. And they would kind of have a talk right there, and they would kind of give him an idea, okay, I don't know if we could swing at this year. I don't know if we can kind of come up with that kind of money this year. And, that would give Mr. Staples, and I'm just using Mr. Staples because that was the name that
Right.
I heard at the time. That would give him an opportunity to go back and say, okay, I might need to sharpen my pencil a little bit.
Right.
Then they would meet again, but then it would be presented to the board. I don't know if that would help. And that
I'm
process.
sure it would, any
that-
communication.
Right, in that process, like I said, we're not going to be decision makers, but anything that can come back with this group, that Richard and I can take back to the board, and the same thing, anything that can come to the school board that y'all can take back to the school board should help with the communications.
Oh, yeah.
When it all comes back to trying to get this budget taken care of. And, we can say Northumberland County this and Northumberland County that. I was worried that we were behind the 8 ball, in which we were, but we were not the only counties behind the 8 ball. There was, and I don't want to put the counties out there, the names out there in a public meeting, but there was a couple counties that, school had started and the teachers didn't have contracts. And they lost some more teachers, and, that was a couple of counties. So we were not the only county that was having issues with the contracts. It appears that the contracts for the teachers and getting a budget approved is, look like it's been
Yeah.
through this whole area an issue.
I think we just need to move forward and, I mean, all of us have room for improvement.
Oh, yes.
So I just think we need to move forward and stop talking about the way it used to be and get our own thing in line.
And let's
and
try to set a
move
goal on what we
forward.
can do
Yeah.
to improve.
Yeah,
No need to rehash what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years.
no, because I don't think that's going to accomplish anything.
Okay. So I hear, Karen, I hear that a communication breakdown is part of the goals, objectives.
To resolve the communication
To
breakdown.
resolve the communication
Yep.
breakdown.
Okay.
So you have to also have to root cause what the communication breakdown is between the two institutions, or two boards.
Okay. So what if we met, like, if for us as a group, so I think because it's a working group, and there is no voting, there is no quorum required, if we set October 26th, November 15th, I know, I'm just, for hypothetical, we throw these out, put these dates out there, whoever can make those dates makes it, Linwood and I will continue to engage. Since there are no decisions that are required, we work with the members that can be here to make sure we continue to make progress. We meet our commitment to the public so they can see there are regular routine meetings where they have an opportunity to provide input. So I had looked at the calendar and these are just eyeballs. October 26th, well, I need my glasses to be eyeballs.
I will say, the 15th through the 17th, the entire school board is at the state convention.
Okay, well, that won't work then because we
Right.
at least
And
have to
then
have 1 or 2 school board members.
We
Okay.
have Thanksgiving.
So who needs to, if there's no quorum requirement, because I'm also concerned by just having dates and people just kind of spottily show up, we're gonna be back in the same spot in June. How do we make this board accountable with no voting and no quorum requirements? If we're gonna have a meeting and set dates with no quorum requirement?
I think you and I need to be at every meeting.
I agree.
And
Okay,
I would
agree
argue
with
that we would want at least one of the other representatives to be there. But again, since there are
Gotcha.
since there are no voting requirements,
Yeah.
you can also kind of do a group discussion amongst them and then make sure we catch up, right? I mean, there's email, there's other things, but I get your point. If the communication's that important, you have to have members, but if we have to wait for all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us to be available,
You gotta have 4, just suggest, you're suggesting 4 is quorum.
4 would be
four
the
being
minute,
two of
right.
us and at least one board member from each
Right.
board.
Yeah.
How does,
October 26th,
I'm not.
county's having a trunk or treat here.
Oh, good, candy, thank you.
Yeah,
So-
we can't do October
So,
26th.
I mean, and we can, so these dates don't work, right, the first 2 dates, but we can work on that.
And we can figure dates based on the next date available. You don't have to fix the date on the calendar.
Right.
But my concern is, there's no teeth in this board. There's no accountability back to the Board of Supervisors and the school board other than the recommendations made in this body that has no governance. I'm trying to figure out what does this body, what do we do here? Because we can make recommendations all day
Oh,
long.
no, I think
Other than to the voters who hear it. The voters are the ones who hear it.
Oh, no, I think it's wonderful, because I think what it does is it's the first time that these groups have gotten together like this in a working group.
Absolutely.
So I'm super optimistic, even just having the conversation, right? The conversation we're having right now, right? We've already decided that the past is the past and bygone, and we're going to move forward. We've already decided, so to speak, that we're going to work to have the school board budget in sooner, even if it's in preliminary form, so we can get questions answered. So I don't think it needs teeth as much as it needs cooperation. And I get what you're saying, which is, right, we could meet for the next 6 months, we can get citizen input, then what ends up happening? Well, that is ultimately the school board submits a budget to the Board of Supervisors. If this working group does its job, there will be very few questions on that budget because it would have been shared ahead of time, right? We would have gone through the citizen concerns. The answers would be out there, and the Board of Supervisors would have the information that they need to make sure that that budget gets approved so you can write contracts by May 1st. If we don't do our jobs, then it's a failure and something might happen. But I'm super optimistic that we can get that done.
May 1st, unfortunately, I mean, based on what Dan said earlier about the school ending earlier.
Look, I used your date.
Yeah.
Pick another date.
That's right. No, we pick a date.
Pick a date.
But it's gonna be an April date at this point.
Right.
It puts everything back.
I have no emotion around the date. So we pick a date, let's say April 7th, whatever it is. But if we do our job right as a group, there will be no questions from the Board of Supervisors that are left unanswered. Because
you're-
we're working between now and April 17th or whenever
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
to get them all answered.
So we're not looking at a timeline of 3 months back and forth before it's approved. That's our goal, right?
No, I'm building in the
That's gonna be our
timeline.
goal
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I'm gonna sit here and tell you, I can't promise you that.
No, no,
We'll
no.
do our
Well, none
best.
of us can, I know.
Right.
Right. And
But
yeah,
we
that-
build in that
But that,
timeline.
hey, that's a start. We
It is a
agree on the
start.
goal.
It is
Yay.
a start.
Right.
So let's just move with
And,
that.
and I think it's also being able to have I think these previews.
Yes.
To knowing what is going to be in
Yeah.
the budget. And as you think about the scoping for what's required for other departments within Northumberland County, figure how it fits into the framework of it throughout the course of the year. So when you get to February, March-ish timeframe, you're not trying to push it around, because the budget does come here in a certain timeframe. It spends 3 months being waited on before we get to the June timeframe for the past 3 years.
Right.
So I think it is a basic idea of figuring out. I think there's also the concerns not only of the citizens, but also of the actual governing bodies. Their concerns, I think, also is also important as well. We have citizens' concerns, but the boards also have concerns about how it looks and what things. And it may just be polling the supervisors and polling the school members to see what are your concerns about the budgeting process, because they're gonna make or break it. That's what happens, really. It's between them.
But I would think that would happen, so I would assume that those gentlemen would go back to the other supervisors and say, hey, what's going on, right? You're representing the board of supervisors, y'all are representing the school board, and we're representing the citizens. So I'm planning on, having engagement meetings that I'd love for the two of us to be able to go out to the citizens, go to different meetings and get input. So when we come to this meeting, you guys hear from us what those concerns are. And the same thing then we go back to the citizens, you guys go back to the school board, you go back to the board of
Right.
supervisors. Again, even though there's no decisions, that communication, you're absolutely right, it has to happen.
I don't think either board wants surprises. I mean, they certainly don't want big surprise figures thrown at them.
No.
And, and I think that's what the common goal needs to be, like you said, just
I
to
think we
own
need
it.
to add a couple more things in this as we move forward to help with communications. I think we need to have an email group for this group.
Yeah,
And I think after we have our meeting, we need a summary, and I'm not a good person to do that, but I think we need to have a summary of what we discussed in the meeting, send it to the group, so.
and send to
as
the
we-
public too.
Well, it can be put on the website or whatever we need to
Yeah.
do with it, but what I'm looking at is, I would like to have something in front of me at the board meeting to report back to the rest of the board.
Yes.
To say, we had this meeting and this is what we had discussions
Yes.
on. I don't think, on all committees and groups, we should report back, and that's part of the communication issue.
I volunteer to keep the summary
And
and
that's
share
fine.
it to make sure it agrees to
And
everybody.
that's what we did.
Just for clarification, since it was a sanctioned group by the Board of Supervisors and the school board, it is a FOIA-able group.
Yes.
So everything has to be advertised as far as the meeting dates, times.
Okay.
We have to post the agenda, and we are keeping minutes for the group. So we will have a record of the
But,
meetings.
well, those minutes, I want the minutes to go to the group.
We can distribute those to the group, but we'll
And-
also post them to the webpage as well.
And
Just
that's
like, for
fine.
example, I'm a representative on the Tech Center Board. Gail's a representative on the Chesapeake Bay Governor's School Board. We come back as a school board representative for Northumberland and report what those meetings, what we discussed, what was voted on, announcements, dates. We do a summary type
Right.
thing. So that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
From this meeting, we go back to our boards and give a summary of what we
Right,
had.
and,
Okay.
and another reason for that, or the minutes, is so we don't get our wires crossed.
Yeah.
We're on the same page, we won't go back and report to our board and one thing, and it end up being something else to the school board, well, maybe I misread something or remembered something incorrectly. It'd
And
be
we-
where this information is written down and we can share it.
Yeah.
Plus, that's the action items. Otherwise, we sit around talking to each other every month, and that doesn't get nothing done.
Right.
And we're gonna do this,
Yeah.
I want it to move forward, and I want something good to come out of it.
My next question would be, what title for the committee do we want? I mean, are we calling it group, committee? Are we calling it a joint budget committee? I'm not a fan, and this might have just been pulled out of a hat, I have no idea, but county/school work group meeting, the school is part of the county, so that kind of didn't set well when I read it. So I didn't know if we wanted to call it something different. That's just my
And
opinion.
that's, unless it has to be that, it doesn't have to be that, does it?
I don't know if that was the way it was referred to at the
Right.
last meeting, so
Yeah.
But, I mean,
No,
without
in the
the organization.
think,
of
In the
it.
meeting notes, it's called the Joint Finance Committee.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to
And you-
know, if we could have budget or finance or something, what our goal is in
everybody
the
agreeable
title.
with a joint finance committee meeting?
I think that'd be a
Lovely.
lot better.
Is that,
Yeah,
That's what it's called in the August 2nd meeting notes.
yes. Mhm.
and I think and actually, when it boils down to it, that's pretty much what it's about.
Correct.
We need to look at finance.
That's why I thought this was a little
Process,
misleading,
not the
so
actual
that's
So
why.
let's
No, it's the process.
leave it at
process.
that, and that'll be a
Joint Finance
reminder on
Committee.
what discussions that we need to have.
Okay,
All right. So we're gonna call it a joint finance
The
committee.
joint finance
uh-huh.
committee.
And I'm amendable to working with Karen as co-leads for the group as citizens. And looking at least building out preliminary concepts for scope, what needs to happen. I think there's the transparency issues, communication issues, and process. Those are three things: communication, transparency, and process. And that's what the citizens have as their question. That's what the boards have as their questions. And if we can begin to think through how to make those smoother, it can work better. And I think it's a bigger question also for the school board is timelines for budgets to be approved based on the end of school being moved up. Particularly this calendar year, this school year.
That's a process issue then.
It's a big
Yeah,
process.
that's,
Big.
so the outcome, the end state, the end objective for the process issue is to make sure contracts can get issued before school lets out.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yes, but how far before is the question? That's
Yeah,
the
not-
question. How far
yeah, not the
before?
day
Not the
before.
day before, but how far before?
Okay, y'all get to pick the
They can
date,
figure
right?
that out.
Y'all said May 1st before, this time it's something different. So, and again, based on what Mr. Jimmy said, there's still gonna be back and forth. We have to make sure that there's preliminary
time.
information shared and that there's time for that back and forth. That's why you saw me work backwards from the deadline of May 1st.
There's a schedule.
If we're gonna say it's April 17th, I'm making these dates up, guys.
Well, we
That's
need
right.
to stop and realize something too. You're talking about presenting your school budget. Well, we're talking about May 1st. But in reality, that's something you need to take back to the school board and have a
Yes.
discussion with the superintendent
Yes,
to actually come up with that date.
Yes.
And that could be one of the topics we talk about in our next meeting.
yeah.
So,
What our budget calendar looks like from this meeting, we go back and we talk and we set up dates for our budget calendar, because it starts with us. And then we bring that to you at the next
Right.
meeting. Okay, I'm with you.
And from a process side, how does the Board of Supervisors feel about approving a budget, approving a sub-budget of the county budget before the county budget is approved? Or either giving recommendations for, essentially, preliminary approval of a budget, because your budget does not going to be approved until June. So just be realistic, the budget does not get approved until June for the county. That's going to just be it's the way it works, it's fiscal year. Historically, you proved it before, so the question is there a provision, which is it's not a yes or no, not just for the board to think about, to give a preliminary approval of the budget, basically says the budget will be approved at said date, pending the approval of the budget in June. It's like, it's a preliminary approval, it's always a preliminary approval. Because the budget's not approved until June, so whenever you did it
You're talking
before.
about the state.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not approved, so it's a preliminary approval in like April or May or whatever it's gonna fall. Just for the board to consider being amendable to, how does that look, to be able to accept a preliminary approval of a budget or a sub-budget inside of the budget?
We'll discuss that with the rest of the board too.
we would.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we're gonna discuss with the rest of the board and county administrator.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
So this is what I've heard. See if I can get it straight in my head. We are going to have co-leads The co-leads will be our community liaisons. Everybody will go back to their individual bodies that they represent to bring input to the meeting. And at this point, we're going to be meeting monthly. We will decide at each meeting what the date is for the next meeting versus picking a fourth Thursday or third Thursday or whatever. But we will do that at the end of each meeting. We'll pick the next meeting date. Our co-leads will focus on communication, timelines, whatever the questions are, to bring back to this group for consensus. And then we, as representatives of our individual bodies, will then carry that information back to our bodies. We will not take a vote on anything necessarily. It will be by consensus, and that, as I've kind of say in my head, we're all the different voices that go back to our vote, to our groups with the same song, which comes in with a common set of notes or minutes from this particular meeting. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Am I on the right page?
Ma'am,
You're on the right page.
good job.
Okay.
Well summarized.
Okay.
I saw some hands go up out there. Anyone want to make any comments?
Let's,
Hold on a minute.
let's get the microphone set up
Yeah.
so we can get it on the recording.
And that was one of the things that we said we were gonna do with this group. We were gonna allow some
Allow public comments.
public comment.
I
Anytime
didn't
public
know,
wants
because
to
I
comment.
thought we were doing just this tonight, so
Right,
I didn't
but-
know.
The
Yeah.
hands have been popping up.
Oh, that's
I
fine.
don't want them to feel
Oh,
like
no,
they're
no,
not
no,
able
no.
to speak.
I totally agree. I
And
was just
that's where
wondering.
some of our questions will come
Yeah.
from, and
Yeah.
we'll move from there.
But that's part of why we
We
need
didn't really
this.
know what to put on the agenda.
We needed it on here so we know, because we could have invited some
Yes.
other people to come as well. We
Okay.
assumed it was just a committee meeting,
So
but go right
that's
ahead.
one thing that needs to be added on to the agenda.
Communication, Jimmy.
Yeah, that's one thing that needs to be added onto the agenda for
Okay.
every meeting.
All right.
125 River Hill Road, District 4. Is this on? I can't tell if the microphone is on.
I don't think so.
I don't think it's on.
Is that better?
I think so. yeah.
Okay. One of the things in regards to the scheduling that needs to be taken into consideration is that the county didn't have a full state budget, so they didn't know what was coming in until, what, 3 days before the end of the month? Because the state legislature took their sweet time.
Yeah.
In fact, truth be known, they didn't get a final budget until, what, 3 weeks ago?
Right.
Okay, so that becomes another issue. If you don't know what the income coming into the county from the state is, that makes it extremely tough on the Board of Supervisors to figure out who can have what.
Well, we were one of the few school systems who did not issue contracts to their employees.
Okay.
So if we
Well,
all
I
fall
can
under the
understand that.
same state timeline, then why were we so late? That's what our employees were asking us.
Okay, well,
Yes.
you know, truth be known, based on the minutes of within your own system, your school board didn't approve off on. Okay?
Right.
Yes, it was presented the 24th of March, but the school board didn't sign off on it until the 12th.
Correct.
So, who else you gonna call on?
Thank you. I don't know if there's anyone else wanted to speak.
Jim Michelle, hi. Is the only thing, I came in late, I'm sorry, it was at a different meeting. Is the only thing this committee or group or whatever you guys decide to call yourselves gonna discuss is budgetary things, or are there other things that can be discussed, questions that we, the public, might have with regard to the school board, the Board of Supervisors agendas and stuff like that? It's the only thing, all I heard since I came in was budget. Is that all you guys are gonna look at?
No, that's not the way I look at it, and I'm not speaking for anyone else except myself. I'm looking for questions from the public, whatever your question could be, if it's concerning the school system or concerning the county, whether it's budget or any other item.
Okay, that was my question, because, I mean, because there are a lot of questions other than the budget.
Yeah.
They kind of all roll up
Well,
to how much
I
is-
would invite you to call me. You have my number. Anybody can get my number. It's public. You know, we don't have to have a public meeting to have questions and answers.
No, but I was just wondering what you guys were going to be able to
Yeah,
discuss.
think
All I heard was
Mr.
money,
Brand started as.
but I think we got more
budget.
important things sometimes than just money.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted the meeting too was the hot topic has always been finances and the budget.
Yes.
But it's not necessarily mean that we're gonna have to do everything to be that, because you'll have, even from someone from the school system or whoever may come public comment and have a question that may have something to do with the curriculum. I don't know, but, you know,
That's what
that
I'm
could
talking
be
about,
asked, and
curriculum.
that could
Well,
be.
why,
have a
why
discussion.
wouldn't that be asked at our individual meetings?
Right,
They could be.
that's what
not-
I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm not,
Every board has their
you're
own public
opening a
comment.
can of worms for a whole nother meeting.
Well, what I'm thinking is if, let's say somebody did bring it to a school board meeting and the discussion didn't go the way that particular citizen, this is citizen over here.
Correct.
That particular citizen thought it should, maybe they could bring it to this board for further discussion, because maybe the supervisors don't hear what was said at the school board meeting. I just want to know
feel
where your
like-
limits are.
I feel like if you do that, you're creating a divide that we're trying to seal up. That's how I read that, into that.
The question I have is for, does the planning commission answer questions outside the scope of the planning commission in their meetings? That's the question.
Well, I think my question was just that, what is the scope?
That's what we're trying to get to.
That's
That's what we're trying to get to, exactly.
that's
So
what we're trying
We're gonna
to
come back with that next week, next
Right,
month.
yeah.
but
We'll
one
talk about the
solution
scope.
actually can be found in the Northumberland County Public Schools Strategic Plan for 21 to 28. Because right here, it says that there's a community advisory committee. So if the community advisory committee meetings could be posted, I couldn't find them on the web, but that doesn't mean they're not out there. But I think that's a great thing where, again, while this group, I think finances are probably gonna take a little bit for us to digest. But rather than, tripping over each other, I think this community advisory committee would be an excellent way to get additional input into the work. It's under number 6 of the strategig plan.
And we have
Yeah.
those at the individual school levels.
Right, so
The
I think,
advisory committees, they meet with the principals.
Well, are those minutes, they can hear me. Are those
people online.
minutes or those meetings published when they're going to happen?
Yeah, they're on the website. They're supposed to be.
On the
We even have a special education advisory committee that meets at the library. It is, if you fall under each tab, like I think it might even say under parents. There's a parents tab, and if you go under parents, then you'll see the individual calendars.
Actually, one thing I think we might want to talk about is how to have one calendar. Because I think I wouldn't have known to go under parents and then go under each individual one. I'm not a parent either, right? I was never blessed with children.
I didn't set up the
So
website.
I think it may be helpful to maybe have a calendar on the website where all the meetings are, and same thing with the county. So from communication, that might be an easy one. If you knew
Well,
when the
that
different.
would be what you
Yeah.
bring, yeah.
Which is great to bring before the school board on the second Monday of every month. But the
Yeah.
scope of this committee, or this committee, the Joint Finance Committee, is going to essentially, we're going to have scope, we only have several meetings to have in preparation for the budget that needs to be approved in 2024. I don't think we have the time to answer intricate details of the curriculum of the school system and how it communicates.
But when I heard this committee's formation, I didn't hear it to be a finance committee.
Yeah, it was, when he brought it up to
When
That's
we,
what-
Just-
we
that's
had
what
the
it was.
discussion on this,
About the budget.
the main thing and the hot topic at the time was.
Was the budget.
Was the budget
The budget.
and questions that citizens had in regards to the, funding coming into the school and where it's going and
right.
this, that, and the other. So, yeah, we need to address those questions. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of pushed for this to get rolling. And, we get those issues addressed, and I'm sure we have, can have other,
Because those comments
concerns
should get.
addressed. But, with the committee that y'all were talking about for the parents and
The advisory.
the advisory
Yes.
committee. If, I looked at the school website and I get confused with it too, and I'm not a designer, but a lot of the meetings, if you're having those meetings, and the public wants to attend, it's, you know, it's kind of like writing an EMS report. If you didn't write it down, you didn't do it. If it's out there where when you click on that page and, like Karen says, and you got a calendar there where the public can actually see that meeting, date and time and location, and they want to attend, and then a lot of those issues and concerns can be addressed in that meeting.
Having 3 schools
But
and
that's-
then the individual, you know, are you talking sports on that same calendar? Like, that's going to be a massive calendar?
I don't know if I would.
No, just
agree
these
with
advisory
sports.
committees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's all you want?
Well, school board meetings, advisory committees, I mean, if other folks, but like, if you want to attend one of these advisory committees, I honestly wouldn't have known to look
So
on the
you just
parent
want to
tab.
add that, you don't want to add like PFO, you don't want to add.
What does PFO stand for?
Parent Faculty Organization.
Right, and this,
Like
and this,
PTA,
Okay.
it's the new PTA.
there's numerous meetings happening
Yeah.
in the system that are technically public meetings. And I think that's part of the conversation, and it may be a transparency question that comes out is how do we communicate what is happening that may be part of it? But again, your ideas are absolutely valid. The flow of the website is a question of concern. But that is a school board individual session meeting, and there's people who can do that work and answer your questions quickly. I think some of these process flows questions we're asking, because I think the scope of this team is very narrow, maybe for this moment. Maybe the next one looks different, but right now I
Yeah,
think it's narrow because we're trying to achieve. But some of the questions you have are valid. I think getting those answers can be done through people on the school board, or the superintendent can answer those questions for you and address those issues very quickly.
The citizens of this county have been asking for a citizen advisory board for 2 years. And when Mr. Brand made his motion, what I heard was movement in that direction. The idea that there are citizen advisory boards specific to each individual school are terrific. But there's a much larger population out here on this side that aren't parents, that are still concerned stakeholders. As taxpayers, as residents, as grandparents, as friends of friends with kids, we are still valid stakeholders in what goes on in the schools. And the discussions will necessarily, I think, spill over beyond finance. And if they do, they should not be precluded from the discussion simply because they go beyond a financial question. Some of the questions that we may have out here regarding curriculum or whatever can be tied to budget issues, and to the extent that we can do that, we will, but don't shut down the beginnings of a great communication and a great vehicle for communication by keeping the scope narrow. We're all highly aware of and concentrated on the financial aspects of the relationship between the school board, the county citizens, and the Board of Supervisors. That is a great place to start because that's where much concern comes from. But I would offer that to the extent that you can expand those discussions and still tie them to financial decisions or proposals made, that's the way to go, and don't shut it down just because it isn't narrowly focused on finance. Because that's where a lot of other concern comes from.
I guess my confusion is, I only see y'all at the Board of Supervisors meetings. I don't see you at the school board meetings. And we have public meetings just like they do. We have public comment
there.
sessions just like they do. I don't see you there. You haven't come and asked us questions that you can get answers to. I only see you at their meetings. And that's where my confusion is.
Dana, and you're absolutely right. And I went to exactly 2 school board meetings where I came to the school board and said, this is the statement I read at the Board of Supervisors meeting. And I wanted to come before you in person and read it to you. And if looks could kill, I would have been dead 15 times.
Who looked at you?
I'm sorry?
Who was looking at you looks to kill?
Well, Names are not relevant.
Okay.
All I can say is that there was no acknowledgement of courage, there was no acknowledgement of honesty, there was no acknowledgement of transparency on the part of someone who had basically blasted the school board at the Board of Supervisors meeting and then went directly to the school board and said, this is what I said. Nobody reached out. I'm not hard to find. And it was off-putting, and I'm not the only person who has that experience. And so to go to a school board meeting, you have to feel like your voice is going to be heard, and I felt like I was dismissed, and I'm not the only person that has gone to a school board, made a statement, asked a question, and felt that way. So and I'm sure that there are people that go to Board of Supervisors meetings that feel the same way. There was a gentleman
Well,
at
I want to formally apologize.
I don't want you to. What I want.
No, I want to, and I want to tell you that I understand what you're saying, and moving forward, it won't happen again.
Well, I appreciate that, Dana. I do. And I think it's important for all of us to understand we are not adversarial. We're trying to do the right thing by the kids in the school and at the same time balance it for the citizens. We cannot tax our way out of the current financial situation. We will drive people from the county. They won't be able to afford to stay here. And so we have to find a way of balancing the needs, not the wants, not the want-to-haves, not the wish list, but the needs of the school against the needs of the citizens. And I see that as possibly the greatest outcome of this group.
Can we start there? So respectfully, y'all have thrown a whole bunch of stuff. I got to say, I'm not sure I was equipped to deal with all that. So can we start with the finances and then once we get to next spring, see what happens?
That's what it has to be. That's the primary.
cool.
That's the primary
So you
thing.
guys will all be good if we start with the finances, get those questions answered, and then encourage, like you said, like I do dial into school meetings, I haven't been in person, but encourage people to go to those meetings and get questions answered too.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And part of the question is going to be asked,
Yeah.
and part of the question is going to be asked within this budget is going to be, why does this cost this much? And that's the transparency of understanding the curriculum structure, our faculty, like that's what, it's all be laid out though. There is a conversation to explain when questions are raised, why dollar values
That's a
are how
great
they are.
point, yeah.
So it does actually, we do go through the conversation, but it all comes back to the scope of the budget right now. That's trying to get back to. So I want to make sure we're not just having conversations, to ask conversations to figure out, why do we use this book for this compared to why do we choose this over that for purposes of for fiscal management type thinking, to make sure we're staying within scope, because our timeline is tight. Like, it's very, we see how tight this thing is already. I want to make sure that we're getting there. And once you get past meetings, so I think about the larger conversations of it being something maybe that what you had in your mind or you all had as a conversation.
So you just led right into, new business, and here's the segue that I heard, because I think it would be an excellent presentation, and I'm not sure if it's only me. I don't know how the school board budget is prepared. I know the process. I've looked at your website. There's a great presentation there that's posted that says this is what happens. In my experience with budgeting, there's a lot of things that go into building it. And so I will admit that in my past experience, I may have cheated the budget process. I'm no longer employed, so I don't have to worry about getting fired. So there are times in my past experience when I zero-based my budget. I went through and I looked at every single cost for my organization. I had every department look at every single cost to find out what the true cost of doing business was. And I only did that because somebody beat me up and said, you're not getting a penny until you do this. It was a very eye-opening experience. I personally don't know if that's how you all prepare the budget, or in other organizations I've worked, my cheating involved taking last year's budget, upping it by 10% because I really wanted a 5% increase. And so when my supervisors would come to me and say, you can't have 10% when you settle for 5, I'm like, well, that's what I wanted to begin with anyway. So for my own purposes, and I don't know, maybe everyone else that's on the group, you all understand, but I don't know if Richard and Jimmy understand exactly how the budget is prepared. Is it zero-based? Is it incremental? Is it accretion? And so understanding how you get to that, like what you just said about the curriculum, I imagine the books, like which books you use probably drive some of the costs. And so for people looking at your expense reports, and I have to admit that I have looked at all the expense reports, and I do have some questions, which probably can be answered, but I can't figure it out. So would you be open and available to do a Budget 101? And the same thing, I think, Lettrell, I don't understand, right? When that budget gets tossed over, it gets over to the county side. What do you guys do at the county side? Do you look at all the state, what do they call, the locality requirements? So I looked at the report today, the superintendent's report for the locality requirements to find out what the requirements are. In some cases, Northumberland is blowing through those. You're at 139% of the locality requirement. Kudos to you. Well, does that mean that you can come down? Don't know. In other cases, it's 34%. In other cases, it's 50%. So what do you, Luttrell, what do you look at? Do you look at the locality requirements here and say, hey, we're above it like this? Do we look at what the historical spending was? Because if you take a look at the instructional line item, it's never spent to the amount that's requested. Kudos to you. But then why are you requesting so much? So I think I have some very basic questions that probably could be answered by a simple budget process. Could we, and I would ask the Board of Supervisor members, since I know you guys understand this already, is that something that we should do in this public meeting, or should I get a private session in how the county budget works and how the school budget works? Is that of interest to anyone else in this group in the public, or is it only of interest to me?
I think it would help educate the public if they had a better understanding on how the budget is put together on both sides. I just, hey, I can go and look at it and I say, I can assume something. Everybody else can assume. But if we don't know the process, the real process, we're going to keep on assuming.
And that's part of the transparency and the trust, is understanding what the other person does. When I'm handed this, what does it mean and how did you get there?
Right, how'd you get there? Because you and I are both data people. I'm sure a lot of people are data people too. But I got to tell you, when I had to zero-base my budget, it was one of the most painful things I'd ever done in my career. It was also one of the most eye-opening, because I was able to go through and find out I had to cut, right? In that particular organization, I had to make some cuts because it wasn't going to be where I felt I needed it to be, right? And that was super eye-opening for me to go back to each of my people and say, hey, what do you really need here? Like salaries, right? There are certain statutory requirements for 22 and 23 that the state passed that were that salary increase, right? That's not an optional. So what I think I heard you all say was, at the next meeting, could we get a Budget 101 for both sides so that both sides understand? Now, do you guys already know what happens at the county when it goes over, or am I the only one that doesn't know? Does the school board know what happens when it goes over?
That's a lot of questions.
But you don't know on what those questions
What
are.
I would think it would help is when we do have monthly meetings and Holly and Tara come and represent the school, and they do have a lot of questions, having a breakdown ahead of time of how we get to those numbers would probably answer all those questions before you even have to ask them. So that's what I'm taking away from it.
But also from the county side, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
they have those questions, so if you guys do a Budget 101,
That's what I mean,
and
they
the
ask.
county does a Budget 101,
Yeah.
then we all start from the same page
That's
on
what I
how the
mean.
numbers are derived. And then that I think is, at least for me, essential before we start any of the other conversations. Otherwise, I may say something that's really stupid, which has happened in the past.
Which would then place, I guess I'm assuming that these would have to happen in the individual bodies. Because you want to educate the whole board, not just the representatives.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think of that.
I mean, I just don't know how to, your board meetings are already tight for time, I know this already, but it's a question that, it's the investment piece on it, right? And transparency and communication this is how the budget process works. However long the presentation is, 30 minutes, whatever, just something short, but something that gives clarity as to hearing it, so when the other body, and it may even be done in the other body's place, so who does the board, the school board, so that people can know what actually happens and hear from representatives as to how this is how we do this process. So that
We
could be
could
part
start
of
it here and record it and then post it online.
Could be available that way. It's public record at that point. I mean, if it's in the meeting, it's public record already anyway.
Yeah, so if we did it here, then everyone could listen in and watch it and see it and listen to the tape. Would whoever does I'd probably just create a work for somebody. I'm happy to help create the presentation, but
No, they are, well, I've seen it, but it's already posted, the monthly
already
meetings.
posted,
Yeah, they post them every month.
right, so in terms of the presentation, I'm happy to get with whoever's going to be creating these to tell you what my questions would be, and I think I've heard. It's not complicated. It is really Okay, you guys have the timeline, and again, I looked at the school board site, I absolutely looked at the presentations you have up there. I couldn't figure it out on the county site, and from Economic Development Committee, I had some questions too on that one, Drew. So, I'm happy to sit with whomever to help create the presentation, whatever. I don't want to create more work for people, I just want to try to get these questions answered for everyone, so we all have the same expectation of what we start with. I don't know what the action item is for each side to do a budget 101, and then, I don't know who does that. Like, is that you guys? Sure. Okay. All right, so that's the action item I'm writing down.
So as an action item, what is the timeline for that? Is that to be presented when?
At the next meeting.
Here or in the individual body meetings?
Here.
So we're only going to have part of each board hearing this.
But I'm assuming that each board knows so the school board already knows what they do. What you're saying is, yeah, but the school board doesn't know what the county does.
Right, that's what I'm trying to say.
So what you could, I mean, if you wanted to, you could invite everybody else if they had time to come. Otherwise, once it's posted, I mean, there's nothing, at that point, it's like asynchronous learning.
It is, but synchronous learning is still powerful.
It is. I'm not going to argue with you on that one.
So maybe it's part of, as in terms of the cross-working group of organizations, maybe the Board of Supervisors goes to the school board and presents how they put their budget together, because the boards, they can legally gather. Remember, they have to be, whatever the numbers for gathering has to be. That's on the gather is when they're all in session.
When's the next joint school board?
School board meeting is.
Yeah, the school board of Supervisors meeting.
That's what I was thinking.
Oh, the joint
Could
meeting.
that be
That would be
an
the-
agenda
Set the date last
item
time.
for that quarterly
When is that quarterly?
joint board meeting?
Oh, we did.
That would be it. That would be the best time.
That would cover everybody.
That covers everybody.
If we did, I don't have it.
Have we even set the
We
date
didn't set a
yet?
date. I don't have anything set here. Yeah, I don't think we did either.
Get some emails good, set one for November.
Yeah, need one in November. So, look, if you don't mind, send an email out.
But not between the 15th and 17th.
No.
I remember, I listen.
What I can do, I can get with Dr. Wargo and come up with some dates, and we can work on getting that set up.
Are we going to set a date right now for this committee? We've talked about it, but we haven't set one.
We should. This is ugly sausage, guys, but you got to be patient with us, okay? We'll get there.
So October 26th was out.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I'm not available.
So are we looking at November 2nd?
That works for me.
That's the next Thursday.
Yes.
Does that work for everybody?
Aye,
Same
aye.
time, same time?
Yes.
Same bat time, okay.
Yep.
November 2nd,
Yay.
6 p.m. And then that's already set, so then we'll know that ahead of time when Luttrell and Holly check with each board for a joint date. Okay.
What are the actions coming out of this meeting, just very quick, so everybody's clear?
Okay, so far, you and I are going to get together and we're going to come up with several priorities that include resolving communication breakdown, getting to the root cause of some trust analysis. We're going to, you guys are going to go back to the school board and you're going to talk about whether or not a preliminary.
And scope.
And scope, thank you. Whether a preliminary budget can be submitted by a certain date so that questions can be resolved quicker. You're going to check to see when the last date is that you can possibly, that would be most efficient for finalizing the budget so that it can be, contracts can be issued. The Board of Supervisors has to go back and check to see that if, you called it a sub-budget, if a sub-budget to the county budget can either be approved or preliminary approved, what's the legality of making sure that that's firm so they can then issue the contracts? We're going to put together, I helped to volunteer with Luttrell to put together the summary of the discussion and action on items from this meeting so that we can share those and everyone can agree to them, look at them. We're going to call ourselves a joint finance committee. It's going to be citizen co-led. The three main priorities are transparency issues, communication issues, and process issues, and how to make those work smoothly. We are going to look at the date for the next joint school board, board of supervisors meeting so that that meeting can include a budget 101 for each side. We're going to add to the agenda for this meeting a section for public input. And did I miss anything?
Did you say the school board will bring back to the joint finance committee our preliminary budget calendar?
Yes.
Okay.
I referenced a couple dates. I didn't say the full
Okay.
calendar, but yes, because you still have to look to make sure that
Yeah,
that can
we-
actually be
All
possible.
the dates necessary
Yep.
Yes.
for it.
And then I also volunteered if y'all want, like, what my questions would be for the budget 101. I have done a couple of those in the past, but for a different type of budget, so I hope it's not as complicated as that one. And our next meeting is November 2nd at 6 PM. And then you're going to get together for coffee or
Absolutely.
other beverages if you so choose.
I'm a tea drinker.
Okay. I'm a Long Island iced tea drinker, okay.
Luttrell, quick question for the, since it's FOIA, as this is appointed by two governing bodies, what's the record-keeping process for that? The notes, minutes, how is that?
We
retained?
will be keeping minutes for this group.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And
They will be posted on our webpage. Yes, sir.
And one thing with tonight, and I think we've done a good job with it tonight, is as we meet, and I know we're under a timeline, but let's not put more on our plates from one month to the other that we can't make any progress. I think with what we got to take out of here tonight and bring back next month is doable, but
Let's take baby steps.
until we can
Yes.
get up and walking, then
Yes.
we'll move along a
I
little
agree.
quicker.
Yes, sir.
We got a lot of ground to go over and catch up on some things, and we gotta
Short
get off
amount
on
of
the right
time.
foot.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, everything so far has been helpful. So we'll get answers and we'll come together here hopefully. Any other questions from the public?
Is anybody online? Oh,
Have anyone online tonight? Any of them, would anyone in the virtual world like to speak tonight? Anyone in the virtual world like to speak tonight? Got anybody? No hands.
thank you for coming, virtual world.
Yep, thank everybody in the virtual world for coming. And if this committee doesn't have any other questions or comments, we'll close the meeting and see everybody on November the 2nd, 6 p.m.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate everybody coming.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let me give you a card, sir.